Hello, my name's Laura Mosley and I'm going to introduce you to A-level English literature at Nishkam. We are extremely passionate about English literature and its importance in the world, and we hope you will be too. And that's what our job is, to make you enjoy English as well as obviously getting you really good A-level grades. English is a rich and varied subject which is suitable to, I think, many different students. So whether you're more inclined towards science or whether you're more arty, English literature A-level can actually be suitable and very useful to many different students. It's all about critical thinking, developing analytical skills and building arguments. But as well as providing these kind of transferable skills that I know you'll be wanting to develop ready for university, studying English literature also gives you many different lenses to understand the world around you. So if you're interested in the world around you, if you're interested in different movements, society, politics, you will be interested in English literature. What we read informs the world around us, and the world around us informs what we read, and it's all connected. And that's why students really enjoy this subject at A-level. Here is our A-level English literature team. On the left is Mrs. Wilkes. She's Vice Principal for Teaching and Learning at Nishkam, and she's also an A-level English literature teacher. She teaches romantic poetry and she also teaches the novels. That's me. I'm faculty leader for English. I teach the modern poetry, the modern drama, and also Shakespeare. Here is a bit of a tour of our department. On the left, you can see a typical English classroom, and on the right, very importantly, you can see the library. We've invested a lot in having the right books for you to read and research during your A-level in English literature. You will need to do independent reading, and we've also invested a lot in books for wider reading around the subject, and you can see some of them in the picture there. So here's what you can expect in your English literature lessons. I know English literature is a subject you will have studied at GCSE, and fundamentally the subject is the same, but there are some differences between GCSE and A-level. It's also important to remember that this is not English language, so you won't be doing any creative writing or any writing speeches or anything you did for English language. It's more about English literature, which is the other GCSE. So the first thing that's different between GCSE and A-level is that at A-level we read a diverse range of texts. So we know as English teachers that the texts you have to read at GCSE aren't always the most inspiring, and you have to kind of read the same things and talk about the same things over and over again. So you might have done Shakespeare, you've done some poetry, maybe an Inspector Calls, maybe Dickens, and you end up doing the same thing over and over again. It's not the same at A-level, and our students really, really appreciate the fact that we do a much wider and, to be honest, much more interesting, vibrant and exciting range of texts. As well as, of course, studying classics like this one, Thomas Hardy's A Test of the D'Urbervilles, we do a lot more modern texts like this poetry or this play, A Streetcar Named Desire, which is also an American play, and you won't have studied American literature at GCSE. And we also do really contemporary things, not just about England. A Thousand Splendid Suns, for example, is set in Afghanistan. So that's the first difference between GCSE and A-level, is the more diverse and engaging range of texts, really. The second thing is that we study a lot about the contexts in which texts are produced and read. So you won't just read the book and that's it. You will actually have to learn a lot about how, why they were written, what the world's like, society, etc. Another big difference is that we read literary criticism. So you're not just going to be asked what you think of a text, but you will also read what different academics, different literary critics have written. So for example, you might read a feminist interpretation from a feminist literary critic or a post-colonial interpretation from a post-colonial literary critic. And you use that to build and to compare with your own ideas. Which leads to my next point. You can expect a lot of discussion in your English literature lessons. We're really interested in your opinions and your interpretations of text because that's part of our mark scheme and part of what you're assessed for. You really are marked for originality and creativity and flair in your essays. So we are interested in your opinions, and we'll do a lot of discussion. You'll also learn to write academically. It's really important to respond in a clear, fluent and detailed way in English literature. So those are the skills you'll be taught during your English literature lesson. Here's an overview of what we'll study in A-level English literature. So in year 12, We'll study this modern American play, A Streetcar Named Desire by Tennessee Williams. And then we'll study poetry of the decade. These are 20 contemporary poems on kind of really interesting themes like masculinity and gender and growing up. And you will also study 2 novels, Tess the D'Urbervilles by Thomas Hardy and A Thousand Splendid Suns by Khalid Hosseini. And then in year 13, you will study another play, this time a Shakespeare play such as a tragedy like Othello. You will study a movement of poetry, for example, the Romantic poets, and you also do a piece of coursework. So to speak a bit more about the coursework is worth 20% of your overall grade, and then 80% is exam. This is really good because you can go into your final exams knowing that you've already done well, hopefully, on your coursework. As I said, it's a comparative essay between 2 different texts, and you will get a choice of the text that you write on. And you'll write about 2,500 to 3,000 words, which might sound like a lot, but in the end, you'll probably have more words and have to cut it down. You'll learn a lot of research skills through this topic because you'll have to independently go away and find the information, find literary critics, and we'll show you how to do that. And the really good thing about this unit of work is that you get some independent text choice. So we will help and advise you on what you can read and what you can write about. But if you have your own interests if there are particular books you're interested in, you can actually write about those for your coursework and you have that independence. And that's why we encourage a lot of wider reading around the subject, because you have this independent choice. So for example, this year, all students were taught The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood, and then they chose a different novel or text to compare to The Handmaid's Tale. The Handmaid's Tale, you might have heard of. It was made into a TV program in the last few years. It's about a dystopia where women's only job is to procreate and create children. It's a kind of feminist dystopia. A few of my students chose to compare it to George Orwell's 1984, which I'm sure you've heard of, which is a kind of classic dystopia. It's a surveillance society where everyone's being watched by Big Brother. And so they're comparing themes like power and rebellion in those 2 texts. Some students are writing about The Colour Purple, which is a classic American text about a young African-American woman who marries a much older man and goes through lots of difficult situations. Some students have chosen a much more contemporary text that they enjoyed. This is Bernardine Evaristo's Girl, Woman, Other, which won the Booker Prize just last year. Again, it's about kind of life in modern Britain, and some students are writing about that for their coursework. I have a student writing about The Great Gatsby, which you might have heard of, which is a very famous American novel. The Bell Jar, which is by Sylvia Plath, where she writes about her kind of mental illness. Or The Catcher in the Rye is about adolescence and growing up, and is another very famous American novel. So you really have a lot of choice, and we'll support you with that choice, but it allows you to write about something that you're interested in. Another topic is the prose topic, which is where you read 2 novels, and this you'll do in year 12. So you'll start off by reading Tess the D'Urbervilles by Thomas Hardy. This is a classic text, and it's about a young girl called Tess in 19th century rural Britain who lives a pretty challenging life and just goes through one bad thing after another. And you'll look at the themes about women and society in this novel. And you'll be kind of reading some of it at home, reading some of it in the lesson, and you'll have lots of discussions about the themes and ideas in the lessons. And your teacher will also take you through the techniques the writer uses and the context of the novel. And then you'll read A Thousand Splendid Suns. Again, you'll read parts of it independently, but you might also read parts in class, and you will discuss it in class. A Thousand Splendid Suns, as I mentioned before, is by this is a contemporary text. It's by Khalid Hosseini, who also wrote The Kite Runner, and it's about 2 women, again like Tess, living really difficult lives, but this time in Afghanistan under the Taliban. And when you finish reading the 2 texts, you'll start to compare the different themes. You'll start to compare how the themes are presented. You'll compare the contexts of the 2 texts. And then at the end of the year, this is what the exam will look like. You'll have 1 hour and 15 minutes to write 1 essay, and the question will look something like this. It's not dissimilar to what the question looks like at GCSE. Compare the ways in which writers of your 2 chosen texts present feelings of hope, and you would obviously write that essay. There are lots of extracurricular opportunities in English literature. We always take students to the theatre if we can to see the plays. We've done that every year, sometimes in the evening or sometimes in the school day, plays like A Streetcar Named Desire and Othello, and we'll also take part in university English literature study days. I'm sure you're really interested in this, which is where English literature can take you. So here is a list of different degrees that would be suitable if you do English literature A-level and that our students have successfully applied for in the last few years. So we've got English literature, English language, law, history, psychology, film and television studies, sociology, politics and international relations, religious studies and philosophy. Law is the most popular subject this year that many of our students are applying for. If you are considering applying for a degree or taking up a career in law, I recommend you do English literature because many universities will look at it and they will look very highly on students who have done English literature because they know that you have the academic writing skills as well as the critical reading skills to do law. There are many careers you can go into with English literature. What is important to remember is that most degrees and most careers aren't looking for specific subjects, but English literature is a very traditional and it's a very well respected subject. So for any degree and any university that you're applying for, they will look on it very favourably if you've done English literature because they know that it's a well respected and academic subject. What we expect from you. So firstly, you need to get at least a 6 in GCSE English literature. You need to read books independently as well as in class. As I said, you will read some things in class, but we won't have time to read the whole of every novel in the classroom. You will have to go away and read some chapters of the book in order to prepare for your lessons. And we need to know that you're prepared to do that. You need to contribute to class discussions. As I said, in the mark scheme, it says you have to give your own interpretations. And the way we develop that is by having class discussions and sharing our ideas. And finally, you have to be ready for a challenge. Some students, when they start A-level English literature, do find it much harder or a big step up from GCSE English literature. And pretty soon when they get into it, they get much better and they get more confident. But you do have to be ready for a challenge and you have to be up for that. Here are some quotes that I got from my Year 13 students about English literature. So this one says, "What I like about English is that it has broadened my perspective and allowed me to be more creative in my ideas. What surprised me about A-level English literature was the inspiration one can gain from reading a variety of texts. What I like about A-level English is that it allowed me to read text I would never have reached for before and enjoy genres outside my usual choice. I like A-level English as it has allowed me to criticise text from a more subjective standpoint. It also has surprised me how much context and historical events I have learnt about, giving me a greater understanding of why certain texts and novels were written. As you can see, students are quite surprised at how subjective it is, how much they have to give their own interpretations at A-level, and also how much context is important. What I like about A-level English is that everything we study is up for interpretation. It can be perceived in multiple ways. In addition to this, many themes are universal and are reflected in everyday life." And that's a really good point, and that's fundamentally why English literature is important. Here are some details about the qualification. We do Edexcel English literature if you want to research it and find out more. At AS, there are 2 exams at the end of the year. And at A-level, there are 3 exams and of course your coursework, which is 20%. I haven't mentioned this yet, but all the exams are open book exams. So that's a big difference from GCSE, where you had to learn all the quotations and you didn't have the book in the exam. At AS and at A-level, you will have the book in the exam. It's a clean copy with no annotations. But that means that the focus is not so much on learning quotations off by heart. The focus is more on good writing, interpretations, and your ideas. So all the Nishkam Sixthform Open Evening resources can be found on the school's website in the Sixthform section. The applications are open for you to complete electronically and you can do that on the website. And we look forward to welcoming many of you, and I look forward to seeing some of you in English literature classrooms from September 2021.